you inspired both me and JC to get involved in the work that we're doing. And kind of as a homage to you, what I would like to do is just sort of capture a bit of your story about your own ministry and your own journey and mission. So just start off, Jay, by telling us what was it that first got you into mission with Muslims?
It was really two statistics that I heard at a day on the seminar on Islam in Philadelphia in 1981. Now remember, look at my background. I was born in India, grew up in India, spent my first 17 years there in North India, which is the second largest Muslim country on earth. So I was ensconced in Islam. I had roommates that were Muslims. I had classmates that were Muslims. Anytime we had a discussion in school, it was always the Muslims against us. We just engaged that. I loved it. So some ways, but after 12 years of this in school, I was fed up with Islam. I didn't want anything to do with Muslims. I was so glad to go back to America and do my college degree. Went on to do my master's degree in divinity. I was finish off my master's divinity in apologetics, but not Islamic apologetics. We went to the seminar. Now, at that seminar, I was told three numbers. 1981, we were told there are 800 million Muslims, huge number, went in this year, out this year, too big to compute.
Yeah.
Then we were told that there were only 1,500 missionaries working amongst this 800 million, and that 1,500 only made up 2%. Now, that was like a slap in the face. I turned to my wife, who was sitting next to me, I said, Judy, what in the world are we doing wrong? How could we're only sending 2% to the fastest growing religion on earth? And that's what got me into Islamic work.
Okay.
Two numbers.
Those two numbers at that seminar, and then what were your first steps into that world then, in terms from that point, from hearing that, how did you go forward?
I went to our mission board, they said, to send us to the Muslim world, said we don't have any work in the Muslim world, which is symptomatic of the very problem. So I said, okay, succumb us to another organization, but before that, I said, I need to get some training. So I went to Fuller Seminary in California, and I got another master's, and this was under Islamic Studies, under Dr. W. Woodrow, who was considered to be probably the foremost Islamicist in the Christian world at that time. Maybe some would see, there are others who have come up who are better than him, but at that time, he was the best to study under. So I did another year, did a thesis on that, and Judy and I went and were sent to Senegal, West Africa, which is 97% Islamic, but it's almost all Sufi Islam. Right. Confrères, brotherhoods. Yeah. The Qadaraniya, the Tijaniya, the Murid brotherhoods. Nothing like I had just studied, and nothing that I had experienced in India. Nothing orthodox whatsoever.
And what methodology were you using out there?
It was called contextualization. Okay. It would be the precursor to what is now known as the insider movement. Yeah. I was all for contextualization. Contextualization was really being taught there in Fuller Seminary, still is today. Now the insider movement is being taught full blast. The contextualization, are you familiar with the whole concept?
Contextualization, yeah, stripping away as much of your own culture and adopting as much of the host culture as possible, with the idea that by doing so you allow the gospel to be presented without any of the Europeanness of the past.
Western barriers. Okay, so you go in there, what you do is you take on Islamic dress. So I wear a lambubu, which is a Muslim dress. You take on Islamic names. So I was Yusuf Khan, my wife was Nafisatu Khan, and my son was Sher Khan. We were the Khan family. Right. We moved into a Muslim neighborhood. We were the only white people on that half the town in TS. Yeah. We were the only non-Muslims in that whole area. Wow. We moved into a house that was only a Muslim would live in, and we lived like the Muslims in that we had a public area and then we had a private area. Our bedrooms were private, but all the rest was public, which means anybody could come in day or night. And we always kept a big jug of water because it's a very hot climate, and this is how we got engagement. My wife worked at the house. She worked amongst the Normans. I went and worked amongst the men. And so I had to learn French, and then I had to learn Wolof, two different languages to engage with them. And what we did is we tried as much as possible to get into the mosque. So one of the first things I did is I went to the mosque, introduced myself at the mosque, asked if I could do prayers in the mosque. Right. I said yes. I said, but I'm going to pray towards Issa, if you don't mind, for Issa. Said, yeah. They said no problem. Yeah, so I was praying in the mosque, praying to Issa, long lines with everybody else. When the fast came, the Ramadan fast, I did the Ramadan fast. Get up in the morning, and well, of course there it's about 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning because we were close to the equator. Yeah. And then I would fast the whole day, and then I'd do iftar. I'd had the the break-up
So
fast
you're
with my Muslim friends.
fully shadowing
And everybody around us was Muslim. There were no non-Muslims in all area of the city.
And did you see during that time, how long were you doing that?
So what had happened, Bob, was a Marabu came up to me and clapped me on the back. And he says, I'm so glad to see you become a Muslim. You've become a Muslim. And that shocked me. I said, hold on. The message I was giving was not the message they were receiving. And I realized the problem here. I realized real quickly. See, the whole context of form and meaning. I was taking a form and putting my meaning onto it without realizing that form had already been appropriated by the Senegalese Muslim with a completely different meaning. Yeah. So if I'm wearing a Grand Boubou, if I'm using an Islamic name, if I'm doing the prayers towards Mecca, and if I am doing the fasting along with them, what would that say to them? Well, the idiot that I was, I didn't realize to ask them what the meaning is for those forms. Their meaning was, this is what a Muslim is, and only a Muslim does. Yeah. I said, hold on a minute. These Grand Boubous, beautiful robes, all the filigree going down the front, they're expensive. I said, this is only for Muslims? He said, no Catholic would wear this. Yeah. So you only have Catholics or Muslims. 5% were Catholic. No Catholic would dare wear that. And I realized I had to take off all these Grand Boubous and give them away, and I had to put on these
Senegalese
Anangos. These Anangos are really just pajamas. They were awful to wear. And for the next 5 years, that's all I could wear. Because I realized that I was trying to impose a meaning onto a form that I had no right to do. So contextualization comes to screeching to a halt at that point.
How long were you in Senegal doing evangelism?
5 years.
And in that time, did you see any fruit? Did you?
We started our own church.
So how many converts roughly to begin?
By the time we left, there were about 65.
65 converts. So doing mission work does lead Muslims to Christ.
Yes, but not contextualization.
Yeah.
I found that once I started being as robust as they were, once I started actually saying who I was, and did not worry about, because I already was white to begin with, so I already stood out. Shows my wife.
So when you adopted the form of being a Christian,
any Muslim looking at me, they would say I converted. Even to this day, I don't know if you heard the live stream we had last week, about 2 weeks ago, I was on the live stream at Hutton, and a guy that called in was from Senegal. Just, I remember you back in the 1980s, you were the boss, I saw you at one time. But 30 years later,
because people still think,
they still remember that.
But coming to the sort of the driving point of what I'm saying is that actually the mission effort is something the church should get behind, because as you demonstrated in your time in Senegal, missionaries do lead to converts, and you had about 65. Now, did that come after or post? Before, when you were doing contextualization, or when you modified your contextualization to be overtly Christian within those converts?
Which question I asked? So when missionaries lead to converts, or
no? So when you had people who became Christians, was that during the time that you had fully contextualized, or the time when you adopted the outward forms of being identified as a Christian?
The latter.
The latter.
Always, yeah.
And so it's when you offered an alternative.
Not just that. I would suggest, and Muslims are going to be watching this, so they would agree with me on this. But this is mainly for many missionaries who are still engaging in the inside element. I would suggest that if you're not bringing people totally into the kingdom of God, which I see is started by Jesus Christ in the first century, that kingdom of God does have certain precepts that will always be in conflict with an Islamic context.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this in other videos. And I don't see how we can continue to remain inside Islam and still be a child of Christ. By virtue of the fact that much of Islam, the forms that Muslims use, not only defines them, but also those forms are in contradistinction to the things that I believe in.
That would come out of a Christian value system.
It's a Christian value system.
So why didn't you stay in Senegal?
I mean, because we were only dedicated there for 5 years, and then we heard that there was a real problem happening in Europe, in London, this city. They were saying that they were going on the doors and they were coming across a whole new breed of Muslims, they said new to them, that they had never come across, very radical Muslims, and they had no one that could deal with them because nobody knew how to answer their questions. And I said, hold on a minute, if this is our next mission field, why don't we go there? Because those are the kind of guys and gals I'm used to. Those are the kind of guys and gals I want to talk with, because those are the kind of guys and gals that I had spent all my life amongst, but that's also what I'd studied. So he said, send us to London. It's not in the 1040 window where the majority of Muslim countries live. It's way outside of that environment. But here there were not just a few tens of thousands. There was as much as 1 million Muslims, and still is, living in London alone. So I said, send us to London.
Yeah.
That was in 1992.
And you took up your residence at Speaker's Corner?
No, that happened later. I came here first, and I knew of Speaker's Corner, but one of the first things I was told when I was here by the missionaries that were already in situ, they said, if you really want to engage with these radical Muslims, you need to go to a place called Speaker's Corner. I'd already heard about it as a young kid. So I went there the first day, and boy, was I overwhelmed. I was just destroyed. Because at that time, there were 10 Muslim speakers on 10 different ladders with all the talibis around them. You don't see that anymore today.
Yeah.
Back then in the 1990s, each Serigne, each Marabu, each Sheikh had their own little place, patch, with all their disciples around them. And the only way you could engage with them is to try to muscle your way into them and then try to speak to them, yell at them from the ground, and you got elbowed, you got stamped on. It was very violent back then. We got punched. I would come home sometimes with bruises all around my midriff where they were pinching me. And things like that. And we would get, my glasses got broken a few times. That at that time, the narrative here in Britain was not a religion of peace. That only came almost overnight after 9/11. In 9/11, everything changed. After 9/11, suddenly Islam was a religion of peace, Muhammad was a man of peace, the Qur'an was a book of peace. Not before.
Interesting.
Which made it much easier to work at Speaker's Corner, because then it really went back to the speaking engagement. A lot of the Muslims no longer were on the ladders because they really could continue this kind of narrative, and we were really hammering them by that time, because in 1994 some new material came to light. And this is material that I came across at School of Orange and African Studies, studying under Dr. Gerald Houghton, just down the road from here, which was this new historical material.
And you've been pushing that whole
25 years.
And was it 25 years the time that you've done it?
I was here for 25 years, but that material I was introduced to in 1994.
So you've been doing that?
The first place I took it was Speaker's Corner.
Yeah.
And I remember Muslims there was no cameras like you have back today. There was none of this, but I was filmed introducing this material that Houghton was introducing. The problems with the Qibla, the problems with Mecca. These are things that I was introducing 25 years ago. That got filmed, put on VHS, and they were selling it in Muslim bookstores. One of the students brought this to Gerald Houghton and says, "Dear Swallow, one of your students has taken this to Speaker's Corner. He had me come to his office. He just gave me a tongue lashing. He says, don't you ever quote me again." I said, "You are publishing this. If you publish it, I can quote it."
Absolutely, we can. And because we're sadly running out of batteries, tell us briefly, have you seen fruit from the work that you've been doing at Speaker's Corner?
Especially with this historical material. We know. Let me just give you an example, just one example. We can give you myriad examples, because we're getting emails all the time of people coming to the Lord because of this new material, especially on the Quran, and especially Dan Gibson's material on the Qibla and Mecca. What we have found, one debate that happened in 2013, that using our material there in Madras, Chennai, our debater, his name was,
We've literally got minutes.
I'm trying to figure his name, doesn't matter. He used this material in a debate that was supposed to be 13 days long with a cleric that had a follower of 1 million people. At the end of that debate, confronting the historical problems of the Quran and introducing the brilliant historical support for the Bible, 300 Muslims gave their life to Jesus Christ. I went there about a year later. Some of them wanted to see me. They came up to Bob where I was, and they just started kissing me. And then they just started showing me on their phones all these videos that I'd done on Pfander Films. And they said, "We are memorizing this material. It's because of you we're not Christians today." And I realized at that time, we've got to get this on the YouTube. We've got to get this on the internet. What you're doing, we've got to make sure it's visual, because these people, most of the Muslims I come across, do not want to read books. They don't want to read tracts. They want to watch videos. That's where I realized the penny dropped for me. We've got to get all this up there so that the Muslims see it and so they engage with it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jake.
Okay, God bless.
Thank you.